And we're live. All right. Thanks everyone for joining today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We talked to a very good friend of mine, Nawaz Damji from Equium Partners. Nawaz and I have been good friends for, geez, it must be 8, 9 years now. And it's been fun listening to his company grow in the property management space. Right now, he is 19,000 units under management, one of the fastest growing, or the fastest growing property manager in the Calgary area. Now, from everyone listening, from Getting Hell Yes, the exciting part about property management is that there's so many different facets to it, particularly when you talk about, example, everyone listening, you've got your single family rental, be built to rent, maybe multifamily, obviously there's commercial, and then you've got, different versions of multifamily and plus student as well. So Nawaz is going to talk about his side of the business and then how he gets to Getting to Hell Yes. What's especially interesting about Nawaz's company's growth over the last, since I've known you, is the diligence and discipline around growing the company and capturing market share. I think what's really exciting for everyone to listen to today is Nawaz's company's ability to capture market share despite all the increasing competition in the market, and also being able to do it in a world where there's competition for talent and competition for customers. So for those in the property management side of things, looking forward to kind of like getting your engagement. If you're doing so inclined, punch your comments into LinkedIn, and we'll answer them as they go. But as we always kick off, Nawaz, appreciate you joining us today. Thrilled to hear from what you got to say. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got in this role, which is a good story for everyone to hear, and then and ultimately, what's a problem you solve for your customers, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. I've never done, a live type podcast ever before, so this is going to be interesting. Well, usually if I say something really offside, somebody will get to edit, but not this time.
No edits.
Yeah, no, let's do this. So yeah, I started in commercial real estate in '05, like right out of university. I got recruited by Oxford Properties Group. They're a international player owned by OMERS, big pension fund, and they were looking for finance, econ grads to train in the commercial real estate space. And so they were poaching us right out of university and kind of taught us the game. And so the first kind of 10 years of my career, I worked in commercial real estate. And as a sideline, I was buying rental properties for my own portfolio. And then that portfolio got to a certain size, and I was like, hey, I think I can do this on my own. And the thought process was really good at the time, but the whole downturn came and forced us to pivot into more and more third party, and that actually worked out a lot better for me than I would have expected ever. So yeah, and we were in commercial only as a firm at plus my own rentals for first kind of half of my tenure at Equium. And then, we got more and more into larger scale multifamily, into residential, and we really found a good niche there. And from there, it's just kind of ballooned. Like we were a 5-man shop with, some commercial until we really got heavy into res. And now we're about 150 people.
Outstanding. When you take a look at that growth curve along the way, like you can't grow that fast without having a problem that the market's looking. Well, sorry, you can, but it's difficult to grow that fast without having a problem the market's looking to solve. All these units exist with existing property managers. How are you able to pull that business away from them?
Yeah, I think that the niche that we really hit on that has kind of become our claim to fame now is that, the team that founded the company, the senior management team today, all from commercial real estate. And we tell our clients all the time, it's like commercial real estate had this, the best practice in commercial real estate is global. Like whether you work in Dubai or the US, you imagine office building, maybe you're worried a little bit more about AC and chillers in Dubai and a little bit more about heating systems in Calgary. But the base practices of how to manage large commercial assets is kind of like a global best practice. So you'll see that, a lot of Canadians go to Dubai and work in that space because the best practices in commercial real estate are all the same. And they've been developed over decades of institutions taking over that market. And, in Canada, institutions weren't really that interested in multifamily, after the 70s and 80s. They really weren't. And, so those best practices that evolved in commercial didn't really trickle down in multifamily and even single family rentals. And so, we started our first foray into condo management, 700 units in the University District site. And, University City was for us almost. We wanted to know why everybody in commercial thought that there was no way to, make condo work for them. And, when we started to look at implementing all the commercial best practices into residential, we found that there's a huge opportunity there to provide service that wasn't being provided at a higher level, kind of institutional grade multifamily and condo management services. And from there, like residential just exploded, right? Now we're, a couple million square feet of commercial, but we have 20 million square feet of residential. And so the boom all happened in the fact that we still are bringing commercial best practice to the residential sector.
And for those listening, how do you differentiate between condo management and, like, let's say multifamily rental management?
Yeah, I think that, the simplest explanation for that is that, when you look at condo management, you're working for the board. And when you're working for an institutional multifamily, where we have that as well, you're looking at the rents, right? You're renting out the units, you're looking at maintenance, building maintenance. But when we look at the structure of the building, the maintenance and operations of the building is almost the same for us, for multi-res or condo, because
Right.
the building systems are all the same, the envelopes are all the same, landscaping, snow removal, taking care of the building is almost the same. The difference in scope is that the individual owners own their condos and we work for the board, or one owner owns the building and we also manage the rental. So the rental relationship with the tenants. So that's really the only difference to us between those two segments.
Do you get paid the same way? Like a third-party managers, American style, get paid a percentage of revenue collected? Is it the same?
Yeah, the pay structure is different. You're looking at percentage of revenues between 2, 4, 6, 8%, depending on the type of building when you're looking at multi-res and single family. And with condos is all per door, because there isn't really incoming revenue other than condo fee.
Right.
And I haven't seen any condo manager really base their fees on the revenue, but it is kind of the same thing. If a 200 unit building, it's bringing a certain amount of condo fees and you're charging a certain rate. It's a 100 unit building, it's going to be a lower fee. The responsibility is different, but from our systems perspective, other than the rental and tenant relationship, we find that condo and residential is the same because our main focus is operational. Like we're looking to, make sure the operations of the building run ideally, because when you look at the long-term holding costs of these buildings, your money's going to go to maintenance and capital. Like that's where you're going to spend your money. And if you can find efficiencies there, your owners are going to be happy with you. They're going to stay with you.
Do you guys offer insurance as well?
Sorry, my headset doesn't seem to want to cooperate, but sorry, what was that, Daniel?
Yeah, no, well, I can hear you fine. Do you offer insurance as well, or are you just all operating?
Yeah, I can't hear you properly. Let me see what I can do with that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. You can't hear me properly? Let's see. Let me try my side.
Can I hear you now? Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Sorry, what was the last question?
Insurance. Like, so a lot of people are talking about multifamily, like the big three right now are, revenue, like in terms of like line items, right? Revenue, maintenance, insurance, interest. Those are the big four items. And many property managers are now offering insurance as a kind of like as a group insurance thing. Does that fall into your management, or is insurance the owner's obligations?
So for condo, we tender the insurance to the large brokers. A lot of the larger brokers in Canada have a condo insurance program, but when you're looking at multi-res, almost all of our multi-res clients are placing their own insurance because they're usually in a portfolio, whether it's FM Global or whatever, they have, across all their assets, a portfolio plan. So just as they add buildings to the portfolio, they add it to the insurance. We've tendered insurance for our institutional multifamily stuff, and the owners are happier with the setup they have already.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about the problem. The problem is running these buildings, right? Now you've done a great job of growing. You've outpaced the market. So you've collected a greater portion of your market share relative to the size of the market growing. That's really interesting story to hear, because like, the cost of change in any operating environment, be it multifamily or be it condo, means someone is making a choice for a reason. So when you talk about that, this is kind of how we start narrowing in on the hell yes conversation, right? To grow at that speed, you're doing something different than than the other alternatives in the market. How are you?
Yes.
How did you
Yes.
find
So what?
that? How are you winning on that?
Exactly. So like this is the thing. This is the secret sauce of what happens at Equium. So if I go back to our original building, the original residential building we took, the reason that we convinced them to switch to us, because like at the time we had little to no residential. We had 60 units that I owned. How are we going to get this 700 unit behemoth to sign up with us? And we showed them that in commercial management, and you see it all the time. Like any institutional building owner will tell you, you get this building condition report that shows you kind of the status of all the major equipment in the building when you acquire it. And you kind of maintain this building condition report to tell you, how many years are left on the elevators, how many years are left on the boilers. And in commercial, we would outpace that life expectancy by so many years.
Yeah.
And that's unheard of in residential, and especially in condo, and a little bit less in older multifamily. So what we were seeing is like, okay, I have elevators that need to be replaced in this office building 20 years ago, but they're still running great because the preventive maintenance was so strong. I have a roof that the BCA said I had to replace in the 90s that I'm still running based on preventative maintenance. I got boilers from 1969 that we got certified at like 86%. So who's going to take them out? And
No way.
so, yeah. And so if you can get the equipment to last longer and defer that capital spend, and in a smart way, right? Like you're doing the preventative maintenance to keep this equipment running well, you're going to be able to save a massive amount of money. And then on the flip side, when we got into res, we're looking at these, the same thing, building condition reports and residential reserve fund studies, and everything's failing before the life cycle. And so, everything's way more expensive because everything's breaking down all the time. As soon as we started to inject, that commercial best practice to operational excellence and start to look at all the equipment, how do we preventively maintain this at or better than the OEM standard that it was manufactured with? You start to get this equipment to last longer. And then the capital spend is lower, the R&M spend is lower. It's the same thing you hear every day of your life. An ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. And so when we look at our original asset, University City, we're still spending the same on R&M we were 7 years ago. We're still spending the same as we were on elevators 7 years ago. The stuff's 7 years older. How did that happen? Because the client sat down with us and said, okay, we accept that you've done this with your office buildings. Show us how you're going to do this with our residential building. And we did. We put together a preventive maintenance plan for all the equipment for the whole site. And now 7 years later, I have the data to show your energy use is lower. Your capital spend is down. Your R&M is flat. Like we're not even talking about inflation. Forget about inflation. We're flat.
Yeah.
And so that money all ended up in reserve. So they ended up saving that capital in their bank account. And so, they put together almost $1 million of savings because they didn't spend it on breakdown maintenance. You break down, it's going to be way more expensive.
Totally. So then like the NOI that these guys, the net operating income that your customers are enjoying is appreciably different than what it used to be with previous property managers because focus on operational maintenance.
Yeah. So we then show client after client after client after client. It's like, here's what it looks like. 7 years of listening to the story of spending the money on preventative maintenance. Like it seems expensive, but when you look at it on the longer time horizon, you see right away it's way cheaper. Like we've had R&M costs drop in certain buildings by like 30% year over year. And this is through audited financials. And so we're taking the client spend, here's your R&M spend 1 year, here's a year after putting in the thing, and it's down 30%. Like you just can't compare what that looks like. But the thing is, you really have to get a client bought into the whole system. Like a lot of clients they're so used to how property management works, is they just want to hire you to be the property manager and just manage these tenants or just manage what we have. It's like, no, if you really want excellence from Equium, you need to look with us through all the different pieces of the puzzle to see how we can improve the overall operation long term. And in the short run, it's pain because changing vendors, we're looking at, does this scope make sense? Should we have some site staff do some of these pieces of the scope and pull it out of the vendor scope? And it's all this review and deep due diligence in how things are being maintained and managed. And a lot of the clients nowadays, they have like, especially in the multi-res space, it's new buildings because of the CMHC building boom that we've had. And so still haven't really tuned into this. Like the older buildings, you see it right away.
Sure.
Like, we took a building from Cap REIT, 264 units. It's got ridiculous amounts of deferred maintenance. And, we hired somebody senior from Cap REIT, and they're like, yeah, we've always just managed it this way, just flush the lines more often. It's just like, okay, we need to look at more holistic long-term solutions. But in the short run, it seems expensive. And then you start to, take a step back and look at the 5-year, 10-year picture. And it's like so obvious.
So it's interesting, like, managers that put themselves in positions to increase the value of the asset call themselves value add, right? And a value add manager often, or owner managers usually, they're out there and they're kind of doing some of the typical like light renewal renovation work. But you're just talking about the core infrastructure and assets. Like, do you guys do the renovation work as well, or is it?
So for some clients, it depends on the scope, right? We have lots of buildings where we're not really focused on that. We're more hired for those complex capital problems. Like, we come in when buildings are like, oh, I have a $6 million envelope issue. It's like, how do you resolve this? And so, we work with them to figure out a solution to, instead of spending $6 million, maybe we spend 3 over 5 years in a phased approach. And that's kind of like, that's where our team really shines, is finding those solutions to the complex building problems. In a lot of ways, there's going to be a little bit of variability in how you rent buildings, but how we rent units and how we manage the tenant relationship, that's like, a lot of people can do that. But looking for how the building works on an operational basis, we don't have competitors. Like that's it's really kind of blue ocean to us, because every other residential manager, especially in Calgary, they're vending all that out. They don't have that expertise in house. Like, we have Red Seal mechanics in house, we have PMPs in house, we have 24 licensed building operators, all full-time employees of Equium, solving complex operational problems.
So then, like, just for everyone listening, I mean, like, that's when we talk about maintenance in multifamily, like, the preventative conversation is usually the second conversation. Like, a lot of the pain that everyone responds to is around resident maintenance and resident requests, like especially the volume and cost to manage that. And then how that relates to the 1 to 100 ratio of 100 units, 1 maintenance tech. And then the increasing costs of these maintenance techs, or just the inability to hire them, is creating a big drain on rent renewals, especially in a market where there's a lot of supply coming online. But your strategy has got nothing to do. I mean, I shouldn't say nothing, but your principal differentiator is on the bones of the building and the asset of the building, and that preventative, like the big, the big equipment stuff. And
there's lots of people who can rent a unit. Let's be honest. Like, there's 250 companies that can rent out your unit. Yeah. There's not a lot of companies we'll maintain the tenant just the same as they will. We're hiring from Hazelview and CapRead and all the other operators, Boardwalk. It's the same people doing that job. It's this additional layer of expertise that's giving them the ability to manage the building better.
And if I'm an owner and I've got increasing interest rates, so my cap rate's going down, but my NOI is increasing because I've got more reliability in my building, then all of a sudden my asset value is going up, and that's what the owner cares about.
Yeah, it's getting people to that conversation, because that's not the conversation that these property management discussions start with.
No.
It's always the same, because the scope that's provided out there in the industry is all the same. Everybody's providing that rental management, condo management, administrative function, tenant relationship, owner relationship. That's all they're providing. And so for us to drive the conversation down to our expertise, which in the end of the day, they're going to spend who knows how much money maintaining this building, especially over a longer time horizon, especially on the bigger, more complicated assets. You're going to spend a ridiculous amount of money maintaining these systems, elevators, chillers, boilers. Sure. And if we can find some wins there, then when you have like instability in the rents, you have, somebody drives into the side of your building and you have these unexpected costs, you can absorb them. Our clients, we just had, an $80,000 flood in one of these buildings and there's limits of how much we can get from the tenant based on the Condo Property Act. So a lot of times condo boards are absorbing this cost. And so because their finances were in such good conditions, we're not claiming with insurance. We're just cutting the check. Like there was just so much built up, almost like preventive maintenance goodwill in the building, that we can absorb shocks. And getting our clients there is actually more of my struggle than getting business or getting people in the door. Is getting people to this conversation. It's like, if the thing is run better, you're gonna have the funds to make choices on, like, one of our first building, they went from one person on staff to, we have a team of like 6 that work there without increasing costs. And that's all driven from the preventive maintenance savings being put into putting people on the ground. So now we have better service. But if you're going to be chasing your repair bill every time something goes wrong, you're not going to have the funds to staff these buildings well enough to have that service level where you're going to outperform.
So for owners that are like when you come online to an owner and they've gone from a traditional manager that's kind of like, we'll call it a P&L manager, right? Because like you're managing the balance sheet, which is different than just the P&L manager. So I think of like a P&L NOI manager, and they transition to you, like they're choosing you because of the, how you're going to manage it in the long run. They're obviously long run holders, so you know who you're talking to. Are they in a spot where they is there a big check they're going to write because all of a sudden they're activating their preventative maintenance for the first time in a long time?
No. So the way that we do is we try to do it in a stepwise manner, right? Like we obviously, whether it's a condo board or multifamily owner, nobody's going to be able to cut a check to spend 30% more in preventive maintenance this year. So what we do is first we go through all the different contract items and see where we can kind of work out some savings in their existing operation to then pay for more preventive maintenance. Like when we took over the Drake, for example, we had a relationship with Waste Management, and they were in a 5-year contract. I think 2 years into a 5-year contract, because Waste Management was so busy trying to do business development with us to get other buildings, they cut that building's cost mid-contract 30% because they got onto the Equium platform. With that 30% savings in waste removal, we reallocated preventive maintenance right away. We're like, okay, we've tendered your insurance or we've tendered your waste removal. We've saved you 30%. You can put that in your pocket. We recommend you spend it here because this part of the preventive maintenance program isn't great, and it's going to catch up with us. And so we usually take that savings to the client, and then we just keep doing that year over year over year.
Like a lot of the discussion in property management versus ownership right now is how it doesn't on the surface, there's lack of alignment between managers and owners, especially in this time of duress where you've got, a flattening of rent increases and you've got increase in non-controllables like insurance and interest. And so, but you guys are talking about being like aligned with building. Your job is to make their asset worth more. And
so the way that we win,
other property managers aren't doing that. Why aren't they doing that? This sounds like obvious.
Well, it's the thing is, like, we've found what we've done is, so every time we kind of look at a scope, we see if there's a way we can supply that service at a lower cost. And then we're increasing our top line while reducing the client's costs. So, we've started to provide janitorial services for certain clients. We've provided security services for certain clients, concierge services for certain clients. We've provided project management services for almost all of our clients. So it's like, okay, here's how this thing currently functions. You guys are going to go to this, capital. We're going to do this piece of capital. We're going to pay a project manager to run this thing, or you can pay us, and here's why it's going to save you money. So because we've provided some of the services, our top line is increasing while their cost base is decreasing. So we are in alignment. Every time we find a client a win, 30, 40, 50% of the time, they buy services from us to fill what we've created.
Right. When you go to competition, like to tender, and there's people are asking, and the scope of the tender is scripted based on the old way that properties are managed. How do you create space to include your differentiator that stays within the scope of the RFP?
This is the hardest part for me, honestly, as somebody who, like, honestly, I do all the pitches for all our clients. I've sold pretty much every client that we have myself. And that is where, like, I try to find the space in, like, okay, when you send it an RFP and you look for an apples to apples scope, I will give you an apples to apples scope, and it's going to be a market-based rate. But I provide them all the case study information of all the other things that we do. It's like, this is what this client did. This is how they saved. This is how we both won. This is how this client did. And we try to shove all that information into the RFP as additional supplemental information, case study information. And
Yeah.
so when they start to read that, they're like, well, okay, how does this work? And as soon as we have that conversation, we can be like, this is what we're good at. This is
Mhm.
where we really shine. If you just, like, I had a client reach out and ask us to, just bid on that exact very, very narrow scope. And they were like, we don't want to deal with any of the other stuff you guys can do. We only want a contract cut down to only do this with no flexibility whatsoever. We have a project manager on the board. We have, an ops person on the board. We want to do it all ourselves. And I said, it's just, there's no point. Like,
Right.
if you're just looking for that absolute narrowest scope to manage your building, I'm sure somebody else can do it. Like,
Yeah.
I'd rather go somewhere where we can shine and I can tell the next client, hey, they had this $400,000 project that I got fixed for 17 grand. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, and we can only manage so many. Sorry?
You get to my next question though. Like, so you're kind of leading. It's great. You got the questions already. But like, the next question is like, do you compete better? And let's say there's a host of opportunities in front of you. There's 10 opportunities in front of you, and you got time for 3. Let's call 7 of them are class A's that have been live for 2 years, and then you got another 3 that are let's say borderline BCs, borderline BAs. What do you do better at winning?
Yeah, so it's easier for us to win on older assets because those clients are already feeling the pain of decades potentially of deferred maintenance and not really prioritizing the preventive maintenance. So it's easier for us to win when they're feeling that pain. New operators, like, we have a good reputation in town. We'll win new business all the time. The thing
Sure.
I like about new business is it doesn't, stuff that we've taken right from the beginning doesn't even get a chance to veer off course. Because it's like from day one, we went to the client with, hey, this is how we think, we manage these buildings around you. Let's tender the snow removal as a package for all 3 clients and see if we can get some savings there. Or, hey, this is best practice for this area, after hours, instead of doing tours, if you 3 buildings share somebody's security after hours together, you get a full-time person instead of each of you trying to tender security separately. And
Yeah.
so we go, like, right from the get-go with new buildings, we're able to come in and be like, this is how it should be done. And you
Right.
hired us, so you obviously kind of believe in what we're saying. So we can get to setting it up right from the beginning, and you don't have all the pain later. And it's nice to see that, but it's almost nicer to turn an older asset over, right? Like, having an older building and actually winning an older building that's had years of problems, that's where it's like you can see there's a big difference from day one to day, 100 a day, 1,000. You really see a difference versus a brand new asset where we set it up from the beginning and there wasn't really time for it to go off track, and then we're trying to bring it back.
So given that these assets are held by groups that have assets in different locations, are you feeling pull into other markets?
Yeah, we have some fair sized clients in Vancouver. We have a couple larger clients out of Ontario, and we got pulled into Edmonton for that same reason. We're trying really hard to focus in Calgary. I like, the fact that, worst case scenario, I remember there was a disaster at one building. Somebody had caught it on, their unit caught on fire, and, the fire department was there, multiple trucks, and they were thinking the building was going to come down. And I, in talking to the fire chief, they were like, we need somebody from the property management team down here. And, me and a couple of the senior managers jumped in the car, drove 15 minutes to the building, and we're there with the fire department, the fire investigator. They got the fire under control. And, they said, look, if you guys can inspect every unit, we'll give you guys back access to the building today. And, like, I have these seniors sitting out in city buses. It's like a February. And yeah, our team was strong enough that we walked the whole building, got sign off from the fire department, and everyone except for like a handful of units got back in their unit the same day. The same day that in the morning the fire department was worried the building was going to come down.
Oh, wow.
And so I can't do that in Toronto yet, right? Like, right now, I can go to my buildings. Like, our team is strong. Like, now, like, our team is a lot bigger than when we did that. Like, we have people that will go there. But until we're that size and scale in those markets, we won't really have a differentiating factor that makes us great. And, like, that's like, we get calls from Canmore all the time, and I tell them the same thing. It's like, I need a certain size of scale to start with, so that when things go wrong, we will fix it. We're not relying on vendors. We're not relying on, phoning somebody 1,000 kilometers away to try to get them to figure something out. Like, we're there.
When you're kind of like, when you're competing on a dollar for dollar basis for some of these, like, I'll call it like generic RFP requests, like what kind of objections do you hear when you're going through the sales cycle and you're kind of nearing contract? Were they either trying to pull something to try and create leverage, or really just curious about the net benefit of choosing Equium versus the alternatives out there? Like, I mean, because like you said, like property management's been around. I mean, it was in the Bible, right? So like it's been around for a long time.
I've never heard that before. I've been in this for 20 years.
I mean, you think about it, right? I mean, there was no room at the inn. It's been around for a long time.
It makes sense. No, I think that, I think our biggest hurdle is always the fact that, like, our job is to create value for ourselves and our clients. And as part of that, we've done that by creating additional service lines where we're providing that service in-house. So clients are really concerned, like, are they getting a fair shake if we do that? But it's always like, okay, we've tendered this to your existing vendor, to 3 good vendors that we know, and here's how we think we can do better in-house. You don't have to do it. It's completely up to you. It's your money, your building, your asset. I talk about this all the time. It's your building, it's your money. Spend it how you want. I'm just saying, here's what we're doing across 22 million square feet. Here's the clients that are winning the most, and here's how they did it, and here's what we're recommending to you. You don't have to do it. Like, I have plenty of clients say, oh, we'll take this, but we don't want that. Or the sales cycle issue is like, it's just so different than what everybody else is providing that it's just not apples to apples. So we try to bid apples to apples and have this additional conversation when we get face to face with them.
Do you find that, like, because you really are doing the job of the asset manager, right?
Yeah.
Versus the property manager, like the property management infrastructure or organizational infrastructure typically is like, let's just go back to like maybe 3-4 years ago, leasing agent, leasing admin, property agent, a property manager, property, a PA, property assistant, leasing agent, leasing admin, maybe 3-4 maintenance techs. That's kind of like your team on a building, and their job is to keep it running. And then they respond to emergencies as they occur, and then the asset manager manages the capital program. But you're offering a capital program, which is, or at least I'm hearing that you're offering a capital program, which is not in the area of, again, they're P&L managers, not balance sheet managers.
Yeah, a lot of our, when you get into the in-depth our proposal, like, we actually say it's like an asset management approach.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial asset management approach specializing for residential. And, we have the chartered accountants on staff. We have the financial analysts on staff. We have we have these people, and we're using them to, manage the capital, manage the larger projects, because that's where the bleed occurs. Like, your bleed is happening in R&M and capital, and especially a little bit older assets. But like that CapREIT asset I was talking about, they've had their BMS down for who knows how many years. New owners still seeing lots of issues with the heating system whenever there's a cold spell. Our ops team put that BMS system back together. They reconditioned it. BMS is running. The last cold spell, we had literally no heat calls.
Yeah.
This building had 20 no heat calls a weekend when it got below -20, and we had 0. And that's a system that was already in the building that had been like shelved, not maintained, and we got her back up and running.
Yeah. You find that, like, as you kind of have more and more conversations in the market, like you go to a social function, or you're just doing a casual networking thing, that conversation on asset management, like, people must look at you sideways sometimes, and they're kind of like thinking like, well, why are you even bother getting into that? Like, is it because why don't other property managers get into it? Is it because they don't have the expertise? They're not really interested in that, or that seems complicated and a lot of work? Like, why aren't they? Because it sounds so aligned with the owner's interest that it's natural and requires less work. So I'm curious as to why the peer group isn't doing that.
Well, obviously, FSR is the largest competitor we have. Like, they're the largest operator of this type of asset in North America, for like, especially in our space. And like, they've told us straight up when they tried to buy us a few years ago, and they said, we want to implement this type of operations excellence across our whole portfolio, and we want to start with this. And it is, the problem is, like, when we see it in other companies, you have like the ops experience, but it's like, where's the business acumen to implement operational excellence without blowing the budget. Because,
Mhm.
if you get like a Mike Home solution, you're not going to build a home, you're going to build a palace in a residential subdivision. Like it just there, you need to be able to balance the financial and business acumen with what's required operationally. How do we pay for it without blowing the budget? How do we make this work?
Right. So it's kind of just to kind of like to kind of catch up where we are halfway through roughly. Um, the problem you solve is around you're a property manager that does asset management. Does that sound
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The market likes that because your interests and their interests are just lockstep alignment. Where a lot of the other industry, there's kind of like there's a lack of alignment in terms of like where the NOI lands and who's accountable for managing it and all the different hidden fees and things like that's all nested in there. Like everyone's concerned about ancillary revenue versus managing the capital asset. Like, do you guys get into the ancillary revenue kind of things like managed Wi-Fi or parcel pickup boxes and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we do. It's so like it's a great add value. Like a good example of this was like we went in we had $50 million of deposits that we look after for the clients. So we
Mhm.
took that $50 million pool and we went to all the big six banks and we're like, who's going to give us the best rate? So
Mhm.
we got deposit accounts at prime minus 1.8 and operation accounts at prime minus 2.2. So it's way above like even like if you go to Manulife's website, better than their GIC rates for
Yeah.
regular bank accounts with no fees. And so that adds to the amount of money coming in, NOI, or reduced costs for running the asset because you're offsetting from the interest income. But
Mhm.
when you look at it, like when you look at these ancillary revenues, it's such a small percentage. Like every dollar counts, and we do it all. Like we have parcel, concierge, visit. We if we have excess visitor parking in a building, we'll sell it. Like
Yeah.
you know, we'll find any way we can to. We did the antenna thing. We all those kinds of solutions we have and work on.
Mhm.
Laundry facilities. Yeah, the list is endless of things that we're out there trying to get. But if you look at it, like it's such a small percentage, it's great for the owner, but it doesn't make a huge impact on our bottom line. We just like to win. Is really why we do that kind of stuff.
So if someone else is trying to copy your model, they'd probably say a few things. Well, I can't find the people. We don't have the expertise. We can't be, I mean, and we can't be asset managers because we don't actually have the expertise or the accountability for it, or we don't charge for it. Like one of the big problems that we keep hearing over and over again, and we're in the market talking about solving centralized maintenance, is because like they have the lowest paid person on payroll is usually in the maintenance stack. There is no asset management or limited asset management expertise. And so consequently, things are just like it's firefighting mode all the time, right? And so we solve that problem around like making sure that that you're only willing to, you're minimizing that expense for those firefighting moments, and like the problem that you solve or how you solve them, like to replicate that, like someone would have to, I mean, you're vertically, just mentioning you're vertically integrated with all your people. I mean, whereas other managers, third parties is a big part of their business in terms of how they execute. So now, what do you see being different? So for starters, what percentage of third party do you have for all of your maintenance services? Or if you got a
Oh,
ballpark?
that's a good question. I would say like new asset, like I'm not like there's certain assets that have literally taken every single recommendation, so we do everything for them.
Yep.
And so those are, I would say, maybe 10 to 20% of the portfolio where they hire us for everything. Like we provide the building staff, the cleaning staff, it's our cleaners, like security staff. We provide everything. And
Yeah.
so that's a small subset of complex assets where we've shown over year in maintenance that our system works. So they've bought more and more of it. When I look at the average asset, I'd say about, their current maintenance plan, maybe we're taking 20%, 15, 20% of their maintenance plan and doing it with our in-house staff at a
Mhm.
cost reduced basis because, you're paying the same hourly rates for, your technician, whether they're here or they're at the vendor, and the vendor's going to have a 30% margin on them. Right? And
Yep.
we're charging cost plus 10. And they all know it. Like we're here's your salary costs, here's your overhead, and here's the here's our margin. We show it to the clients, and we're like, this is where the savings is coming from the vendors. So
Right.
about on average, probably 20% of the maintenance scope we can do, and the rest still gets vended out. We're like huge clients for a lot of the HVAC and plumbing companies, but just having the people that can do that here, it makes a big difference, right? Like you're not just relying like my biggest beef when I was sitting on my condo board, when I was working in commercial property management, I tell people all the time, I'm sitting there, I work at Oxford, I manage Bow Valley Square, massive commercial asset. Nighttime, I'm on my condo board in a townhouse complex.
Mm-hmm.
And, the property manager we have a preventive maintenance plan for some fan. Okay, great. So we paid this vendor to maintain this fan. This fan breaks. Now I'm paying that same vendor to repair this fan. That
Sure.
repair fails for whatever reason. It's not related to what they fixed, supposedly. Now I'm paying them to replace it. Where is the checks and balances on that?
Mm-hmm.
As a property manager in commercial, I have my ops team overseeing these vendors. They don't get away with that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, oh, the preventive maintenance wasn't done. Here's the logs. Here's the pictures. We're not paying for this replacement or this repair, or these types of equipment don't get repaired. Like this, you can't repair this. You should just move to this new system. So having that expertise was how commercial wins over residential every time.
I think that's an interesting like differentiator again, because like the conventional market, how do I frame this politely? They don't share the same level of rigor over maintenance expenses and operational expenses, right? And so they don't double check. In fact, there's a number of managers out there that mark up the vendor's expense on top. So, like you said, like the vendor's marking up by 30 and then the manager's marking up by 15 and taking a number out of that. And so they're counter incented to actually reduce maintenance for the sake of their revenue.
Yeah, I think that's on their part a little short-sighted, because look, if I show you savings and you're an aligned client with me, you're going to buy more preventive maintenance from my people, and my top line is going to grow that way. Like, I'd rather you do better and I do better than you do worse and I do better. Like that, it just, like, we're on opposite ends of that fight. Like, it doesn't make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want these relationships to be long term. Like, our managing our retention rate at like 99%. We To have that long term relationship with the client, like, they really have to trust you, and
Yeah.
you have to prove it. Like, that rapport has to be built year over year. Keeping costs at or below inflation, especially controllable costs, because uncontrollable costs are out there: insurance, property taxes, interest rates. Those are all not in our control. So, like,
Yeah.
that's why I'm tendering the banking. I'm tendering the snow removal. I'm tendering the cleaning. I'm going after everybody.
Interesting. When you're taking a look at the market, and let's say in a non-public or like a non-RFP situation, how can you look at a building and know that they're ready for Equium?
I think just because we've expanded our scope into so many different types of assets, like, we have like the largest business park in town, we have industrial, we have office, we have condo, multi-res, we have new multi-res, we have old multi-res. Like, now we're into everything. Like, we have single family, I've got 1,000 single family homes. Like, we have it all. And so now that we've kind of expanded our scope of type of buildings and type of product we would manage, and we see the net results, because we're very, very aggressive on the financial side. So we see, like, okay, like, now you're starting to see things are opening up because it's being maintained better. Okay, so there's a little bit more slush capital at the end of the year. There's a little bit more money in the bank, so we can tell the owner, hey, when we submit a next budget, we're going to include these additional lines of preventive maintenance. That's going to then roll forward and save us in the next year even more. And then, year over year gets better and better. And so I think that if done properly, we can manage any building better than what's out there. And I can prove it through audited financial information. But the thing is, it's like getting the clients there. A lot of the clients are so used to how it's managed out there that we're so foreign. Like, this is such a foreign idea. Like, even bringing managers in from outside, like, they're like, what? They have no idea. Like, they don't. Whenever something goes wrong out there in the industry, property manager picks up the phone, calls their trusted vendor, and they go try to figure it out. It's like, no, send the ops team to go there and diagnose this problem properly, right? And we're not trying to fix things over and over again.
It's interesting because, like, one of the things that, like, we've got a demo day coming up on Thursday to a bunch of multifamily prospects, and it's our core differentiator in the market for what we do. This is around being able to triage and resolve prior to rolling that truck. Right. And a lot of operators are at a disadvantage because managers are disadvantaged because they can't necessarily get that expertise there. Either it's after hours, there's nobody there. And like that's a foreign concept to a lot of managers, is to
I know.
triage, right? And resolve. That's like that's your standard operating procedure, is to triage, resolve, and double click on invoices, right? Like software that doesn't even, the invoice goes, like the work order gets created from the resident and it goes straight to the vendors to bid. And then it goes, once it's completed, it goes straight to the owner to pay. No one's looked at it at all.
And that's where you're going to find the biggest cracks, like where you're going to find the most money is what we found, is like taking apart what we're spending money on in R&M. Obviously vendor contracts, there's a lot of really bad vendor contracts. Like, the residential managers signing vendor paper for these agreements. It's like, how are you going to sign vendor paper for a snow removal contract? Like, this is a high liability item. Why are they signing vendor paper? Like, we've created our own residential and commercial contracts for these vendors to sign that protects the owner, protects the board, because we knew in commercial, you never sign vendor paper. But in residential, the manager signs off on these. They don't even have contracts. They sign the work order. They sign the proposal for snow removal for this year. This one-page proposal. Like, where's the liability, indemnity, insurance? Like, where's this stuff, right? And so, these are all. I know everyone's looking for more efficiency and having, a tenant put in a service request and they go straight to the vendor and the vendor gets automatically scheduled through Calendly and the vendor comes out and it gets paid automatically. It seems so efficient, and I agree. If that's your process, that's way more efficient. But that's not our process. Right? So
what we're hearing is that process is actually being it's losing favor because people are spending money faster, and the lack of oversight, especially when you've got distributed sites or scattered sites, it's creating opportunity for like out of market rates, right? And so they're overpaying. And so now I'm overpaying. Now I'm paying $400 for a toilet replacement leaky toilet's not running, $400 invoice. That's what the owner sees. They actually don't know if it was a flapper or if the toilet needed to be replaced. They don't know anything else. All they see is that. And then that's just happening at a faster rate because there's the automations in place.
Yeah, my favorite example for clients is like the after hours flood. Okay, so I'm like, this is my favorite example, and you'll see it every time. You have an after hours flood in your building. What's the property manager's response? They're going to pick up the phone and they call a restoration company. Restoration company is going to come out and deal with it. That's solved from their perspective. The problem is the restoration companies, they're going to demo as much as they possibly can get away with because they get paid for the amount of stuff that they rip out. And then they get to bid on the rebuild, which is another huge flaw in the industry. In an emergency situation, I need a restoration company that can mobilize 100 people in 15 minutes to an hour. Great. But why are they bidding on rebuild? Like, that's when you use a GC and lower the margin. Like, you have this massive overhead for a restoration company because they need to be able to mobilize overnight. When we're doing a rebuild, now this is scheduled work. You switch it out of their hands. So that's one thing. But at the same time, in commercial, you do not just dispatch a restoration company. Where is the oversight? My team will go there and triage the emergency with the restoration company. Nothing gets ripped out unless it's gray water. Nothing's getting ripped out until we've done a drying cycle for 72 hours. I get moisture readings. If there's an argument in either party, I'm getting an environmental engineer to review those moisture readings for $1,000 before you go and rip out $30,000 worth of finishes saying it got wet. Right? Like, dry in place is standard in the US. And like in Canada, it's like, oh, let the restoration company go run ramshot, run your drywall down the entire hallway for 100 feet because it got wet. It's like, okay, there's drying, dehumidification, moisture readings, and if necessary, environmental review of those moisture readings to see what actually needs to be ripped out. Right. Then we'll rip it out. Then we'll rebuild with a lower cost vendor. But that's all overseen by our operator, our project manager. There's oversight.
But is that because you're looking to get creative in how it gets paid? Like, if I'm going to go through insurance for this flood, then all the prices are set. One-stop shop, restoration company does it all. One less headache. So my preventative maintenance program is actually my insurance.
That is what we don't want. So
is that what you see?
So if it goes over a certain size of disaster and everybody knows it's going to insurance, okay. But do you know how many times a $30,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 disaster could have been 20 or 10? All the time. And if it's 10 or 20, maybe we're just cutting the check and we're not claiming, right? Yeah. And then that's going to keep our long-term insurance rates down. because we were able to absorb this shock because we managed it better.
Well, there's
And
owners that
so
are running tests right now because their insurance has gone up so much all over the market.
I was sitting down with one of the largest insurance brokerages in Canada, and I was debating this strategy with them. And the account manager that has our account had to correct their VP, saying, "Yeah, they claim the least in the entire industry." They had to correct them because I'm like, if it's done properly, the claims in commercial are near zero. Like you need a massive loss, and sure, the owners have bigger pockets, but it's also how it's managed. How the disaster is managed makes all the difference. If you have a restoration company, they're going to put out as many fans as they can. They're going to demo as much material as they can because that's how they get paid, right? And so having the building operator and the project manager involved overnight, like we have our call centers in-house, fully staffed 24/7 in Calgary. We have 3 building operators on call 24/7 overnight. Our staff go to emergencies to try to stop this from becoming a disaster.
Right. Outstanding. Okay, so we know how you win. Your asset management that looks like property management, right? You grow the value of the owner's assets, which is that's what they're trying to protect at the end of the day, right? That's why they're in that business. You love to win in areas where you can show asset improvement or reconditioning or however you want to frame it. Like value add isn't the right word because that means something else, but you know what I mean? You add value to the asset through your program. And so those let's say BAs, lower A, CBs, you love that space. You win because when an owner picks you, their asset's going to be worth more than it would have been through other alternatives. And that's what they care about the most. You love to look for buildings that are, maybe suffering through dilapidated or conventional management over the years. You probably know how your competitors win in that space or how they operate. So you probably can go up. They've been with XYZ for 4 years. They probably have these things that are deficient right now and a deferred maintenance liability that's growing. And when you go talk to them, like you answer the questions about their biggest concern, which is I have this asset that I've underwritten, and I've got a debt that I've got a debt obligation that needs to be funded, and I don't want to end up with a building that's upside down on paper at the end of the term of whatever I'm dealing with. So those are all hell yes statements, which is outstanding, which shows why you're growing so fast in the marketplace, right? Because you're competing on something different and you're aligned with owners' interests, which makes you very different and very compelling. When you're talking to folks in the market that are looking to grow or sell or find places to sell, how do you help them identify what's hell yes?
Yeah, I think, I think the ideal, obviously we think that we can manage these buildings better. And like we try to track all the wins and show it to the clients to be like, once they really dig into what we've done at these assets, they become a hell yes. But they if they're still thinking about how property management is run in the industry and they're just looking to replace the property manager with somebody more responsive or more communicative, sure. But until you start using Equium for what they're really good at, which is operational excellence, the financial acumen and business acumen to put the preventive maintenance together without it costing you an arm and a leg, you're not hiring us for what we're good at. And you might be able to find somebody else who could do that small scope that you're looking for better or equivalent, sure. But when you look at our entire program and you actually take it apart and sit down with us step by step and look through it, you'll realize that for the same cost, you're going to be better off.
I think it's interesting for the audience to hear is that you're doing this on the same, expense/cash basis as the alternatives that are out there. So why wouldn't you choose a cost being equal, but in one case my asset is appreciated, in one case my asset is depreciated? Like this becomes a no-brainer. It becomes a hell yes.
That's the way I see it. Yeah, absolutely. Like we had, these debt obligations have gotten way more complex. Like CMHC is starting to have like these capital requirements in the loan. So like you're going to have to do a 15% reduction in your energy as part of your loan before they're going to put your loan in default if you don't do this capital. So one of our clients had, picked up a, large scale asset where, if we put the capital plan in that the engineer had approved and put in their loan, would have cost them $2.5 million. And we worked with the engineer And now we're going to the lender with this proposal that we're able to find that energy savings with $50,000 of capital instead of $2.5 million. And like those kinds of wins, like our competition can meet me anywhere and show me where they could have done that anytime, any place. That's not something they can do. That's something only Equium can do. And so anytime, any place.
Do you find they just back out? Like, are they dropping out of competition?
There's been vendors that say, we don't bid on high rise anymore in Calgary, and stuff like that, which is, it's technical. And if you think you're going to run it like townhomes or like old school low rise, you're not. Like, you're just going to fail, right? Like the elevator companies are going to bleed you dry. The chiller's not going to work properly. You're going to try to do compressors one at a time. You have no idea that there's a phased approach for all this stuff.
Outstanding. Super interesting. Folks who want to get a hold of you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn every day, man. Message me on there.
Nice. Nawaz Damji at Equium. Who should we talk to next? Who do you have in your network we should chat to? This is super interesting.
Yeah, I thought, I thought about that, and I think I'm not sure if you've had him. I looked through a few of your podcasts, like Alkrim Kimji with Propera. He's really good. He's a really good kid. Yeah, and he's like, so Propera is backed by the Harvest Builders, like the Skip the Dishes guys. Yeah. I think they've got tens of thousands of units, and they're a Calgary-based company. And I think they're going after larger multifamily operators, and I think their product's pretty good, and I think you'd be a good plugin for them too. So,
awesome. Yeah, he's a gem.
Yeah,
I'll get a hold of him.
Yeah,
he's full of energy.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
cool. All right, everyone else listening, thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate it, Nawaz. Thanks for your insights. I think this is super interesting. Especially excited to have you on to offer that alternate perspective on property management, especially across how you guys are across the different sub verticals or asset classes. Like, that's super interesting for everyone to hear that there is a different way to solve this problem, particularly since a lot of managers are kind of like got their hands in their pockets right now trying to figure out what to do, given that the market is feeling a lot of change, right? For those listening, follow us on Apple, on Spotify podcasts. Obviously, you can get a hold of me whenever you want on LinkedIn. And do like and comment on the podcast. We do appreciate it. Add to your downloads. It makes a big difference. And Nawaz, thank you very much for joining us today. This is super interesting. Hope everyone had enjoyed the show. Any comments you add to the LinkedIn Live, we'll get to them as they pop up. And appreciate everyone for listening. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Nawaz.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
All right. It was awesome, man. You kicked